Hey, everybody. Good evening. My name is Hamid Khan with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and welcome to our fourth Tuesday of the month webinar. This is in lieu of our in-person meetings. And today's webinar is about data-driven policing, and I will pass it on to our facilitator, Tiff Guerra, in a minute, but just wanted to quickly go over some logistics. As you're signing in, some of you may be are muted, and which we will open up and as we move along in the conversation, because we've been Zoom bombed, and so just try to make sure we just preserve the integrity of the space. Also, the chat is open to hosts only, but again, as we move along, we will be opening up the chat for everyone too. This meeting is being recorded, and it's going to be uploaded on our website, stoplapdspying.org, hopefully by Saturday. And yeah, so with that, once again, thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Tiff Guerra.
Hi, folks. My name is Tiff, they, them pronouns, and thanks so much for joining us tonight and joining the webinar. The name of this webinar is The Police State and the Banishment of Communities. And today we're going to be continuing our conversation about policing of land in Los Angeles, and specifically looking at the way that the community of Skid Row has been policed historically and presently, and also outside of policing, how the city works to displace the residents of Skid Row by using rezoning and redevelopment. So we're also going to be talking about who is most impacted by this, and specifically how does it impact folks who are in the queer and trans community or who are LGBTQIA. This is part of our fight against data-driven policing. And it's just one of the fights that we have here at the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. We do meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month, such as tonight. And these are our meetings that we do like to give a chance to kind of share out to the community what we've been working on, what we've been talking about, and what we've been learning. And we really invite folks to engage with us in this work, and to join us, in anything that that you do find interesting, or you feel like you kind of see where you could fit into that work. And we invite you to join us in that fight. And also just want to let you know about some other fights and meetings that we have going on at the coalition. On the first Tuesday of the month, we do have the Gender and Sexuality Working Group, the fight against the war on youth. That is the second Tuesday of the month. And then at our general coalition meeting, we have that on the third Tuesday of the month. And we know that we saw a lot of you folks there this month. And your folks are welcome to join any of these meetings or all of them. And again, to reach out to us to let us know how you'd like to be involved, or if you'd like to be involved. And so here at this fight, which is again the data-driven policing fight, we do have two main working groups. So we have the Land and Policing Working Group that meets on the first Monday of the month, and then we also have the Data-Informed Community-Focused Policing Working Group, and that meets on the third Monday of the month. And with the Land and Policing Working Group, what I'll do now is just give a brief overview of what each of those groups does. With the Land and Policing Working Group, we are engaging in research and ongoing work that is uncovering and exposing the harms of LAPD's previous predictive policing programs in Los Angeles, and that was Operation Laser and PredPol, and examining how LAPD and city departments together use those programs and work together to contain, surveil, and control communities and people in the community, and to essentially to displace and banish from the communities. And specifically looking at how that was happening in South Central Los Angeles and also in downtown Los Angeles. So those are the areas where that policing was kind of focused and concentrated. And so that has been where we've been looking at the impact and the policing of that the most. And also within that group, we've been building up, our outreach and the goal of engaging and sharing information with the communities that have been most impacted. Then with our second working group, so with the data informed community focused policing working group, that one is more looking at LAPD's most recent version of data driven policing, and that is called data informed community focused policing. And we're working to learn more about, like, what does that mean? What are all the components? How do they work together? How are they being operationalized and funded? What is the impact on community again? And then again, sharing that information out to community. So that is a little bit about the work that we are doing here in this coalition fight. Those are the two different working groups that we have going on. And then as far as our agenda today and what we're going to be talking about, we are excited. I'm not sure if we are going to be joined. We are hoping to be joined by our comrade from LA CAN. I'm not sure if we will be, but essentially we want to have a conversation about the work that we've been doing with our comrades at LA CAN about, again, the policing of Skid Row and what that's looked like over time, how that's happening today, how data is being gathered on folks today, and then how that has been used to kind of construct boundaries and to contain folks in the Skid Row downtown area. So kind of creating divides. And then the purpose of that, looking at the bigger purpose of that, which is to be making room for development, and how the city has been like participating in that, and how that's happened historically to kind of create a containment zone around Skid Row that is, again, making room for redevelopment and folks to be coming in who are newer and whiter to the area. So we're going to have a conversation about that, and then also related to the policing of land and thinking about who gets policed. We are looking forward to having a conversation with our comrade Chella. Chella is a coalition member and organizer and artist, and we are going to be talking with Chella about the work that Chella is doing to bring attention to the specific needs and the rights of folks in the Black trans community, and specifically the rights of Black trans women, Black artists. And so we're going to be talking with Chella in a little bit as well. And we're also going to be sharing out more of the work that this working group is doing. So talking a little bit more about, as I was describing data informed community focused policing, talking a little bit more about some of the educational materials that we have been developing, and also updating on a number of the PRAs, which are the Public Records Act requests that the coalition has been engaging in, which is a tool that the coalition does use a lot to kind of unearth and expose things that are going on with LAPD and with other city departments. So we will have some updates to be sharing on a number of those PRAs as well. So before we get to that, though, I will just pause and see if we have any questions from anyone at this point, or if there's anything that anyone else would like to add that I haven't thought of that we would like to be discussing today. So I'll just pause for a moment. Okay. All right, and I don't think that we have been. What we're going to do is we're going to move to our first agenda item, and I don't think we have been. Okay. So I think that we're unable to be joined by our comrade, but what we will do is, so again, what we wanted to do is we have been doing work with our comrade Steve at LA CAN. That's the Los Angeles Community Action Network, and specifically what that's been around is, again, looking at the way that in the Skid Row area, how folks have kind of been, how the boundaries of Skid Row over time have been pushed back due to policing, but also due to kind of an agreement between the city and the community. And so let me see. I do actually have some notes about this. So
If you want to, if I can share the research that we've been doing with Steve,
okay.
if that feels good for you, or I can hold off when you're ready.
Yeah, you know what I was looking for, and I know that it might be a bit dorky to be looking at notes while I'm doing this, but that's just how I work. Is just to be talking about, because in our last month's meeting, we did actually kind of start this conversation already, and that was and what Steve kind of updated the group on at that time was how when we're talking about the containment of Skid Row, or when we're talking about the boundaries of Skid Row, we're talking about the boundaries that were established as part of the Blue Book Containment Plan. And that was something that was established in 1976. And that was a plan that was actually put forward from the community, the Blue Book Containment Plan. It was brought forward in response to a Silver Book plan that was proposed by the business community. And the business community, with their Silver Book plan, what their idea was to completely raise Skid Row and to completely just replace it with developments. And the Blue Book plan came out as a response against that, and saying, okay, no, we don't need to do that. What about if we actually have a containment of Skid Row? We consolidate the services for folks. We invest in low-income housing in that area, and we kind of agree that the borders of Skid Row will be from Alameda to Main Street, and then also from 3rd to 7th Street. And so those were kind of the informal boundaries of Skid Row that were set at that time. So as we have these conversations and we're talking about the boundaries of Skid Row, it's those boundaries that we are actually referring to. And they were ultimately adopted by the city in 1976, and they kind of have been observed in that informal way over time. And but now, today, what is happening is the city is proposing a rezonement and to have redevelopment in that area. So yeah, Jamie, if you would like to, or if you're able to, talk a little bit more about like some of those conversations or what we've been talking about. And
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, so hey folks, my name is Jamie. I'm also with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and have been working with a group of folks like Sabrina and Shakir on this call on that body of work that Tiff was talking about around land and policing. And so two of our focus areas have been Central Division and 77th Division. And what's really interesting, and I think, you know, just to preface how glad I am to be a part of this project, is really learning this like very long history that Tiff was laying out in regards to how Skid Row, you know, has always existed the way it is, you know, a kind of area where poor folks, migrant workers, immigrants, you know, Black, brown people, are able to live in a sense. It's existed like, you know, since the inception of LA and the coming of that Pacific Railroad. But, and the idea of how that area was policed has been, you know, the same for decades and generations. But I think like fully knowing that story and like kind of what we know now, because one of the reasons why we're so involved in looking at Central or 77th Division and Central Division is because we were able to, through our work, unearth a lot of maps and mission sheets that were created by LAPD through two of their predictive policing programs that we successfully dismantled. Tiff was definitely a co-lead in that campaign to dismantle that those programs. And through all that work and power building, community power building, we were able to surface these like really like intense predpol hotspot maps and this other program called Operation Laser. So we started to analyze these. And like I was saying, it's just that, you know, today I was really reflecting on how I've been, you know, with the coalition for 10 years, but I think this is the first time that I'm really seeing the city of LA, and I'm seeing Skid Row for its history and how closely tied it is into South LA, South Central specifically, and how there's just this kind of circling that's going back of people just kind of going from South Central into Skid Row, and how it's how this city operates that way, right? And I think we intuitively know that, but to see how it all comes together through various structural racist policies, either of employment or housing or disenfranchisement of areas. So I'm really, again, I'm just kind of saying this, but I'm really grateful that to be spending time with Steve and to be spending time, and Steve is our comrade from Los Angeles Community Action Network, and that all the time that he's been spending with us, just really guiding us in our journey. Yeah, so essentially what Tiff was talking about, I'm going to share my screen and just kind of share out some of the info that Steve was sharing with us, because part of what this analysis really is about us, like, kind of, how do you say, broadening our understanding of policing and how it impacts like all sectors, right? And this was one way for us to really connect with folks on the ground that are particularly doing housing work, and how can we show up in those spaces and really kind of tell the story of policing and how areas have been policed, and support that struggle, right? And build that intersectionality. So like what Tiff was talking about, and I'm going to go from here and I'm going to work backwards a little bit to kind of talk about what the report is doing. But what we're trying to do here is basically start to organize our land and policing folks in how to utilize the analysis that we have of the laser zone maps, and I'll show what those look like in just a second, and the predpol hotspots, and how those kinds of mapping of the land, really tells the story of this partnership that Tiff was talking about with LAPD, with real estate, and with, city ordinances, municipal codes, etc. So in 2018, the city announced its, next plan to revitalize downtown, because downtown, when you get into the history of it, has been one big revitalization project after another. And then the person who gets the shit end of the stick, pardon my French, is always poor people, poor, Black, brown, queer, and people who don't have homes. So there's been a continual effort by community organizations to fight for the preservation and the right to remain, right? Because the plans have always been, since the revitalization of Bunker Hill in 1950, to the Silver Book plan that Tiff was talking about, to the compromise where community groups had this horrible kind of bed, what do they call it when you're under that umbrella, where, and you don't want to be under an umbrella with certain people, but you happen to be, where they were really just trying to preserve the demolition of Skid Row, and preserve that at the single room occupancy hotels in Skid Row to preserve that right to remain, because so many people for generations have found home in the community of Skid Row. And so then, you kind of come into the new revitalization plans, circa like 2000, and the institutionalization of the Safer Cities Initiative. The same thing is happening, sweeps, and, kind of making sure like those buffer zones that Tiff was talking about that, contain Skid Row. When we think about the areas starting in Main Street on 7th to 3rd Street to, Alameda, and making sure nobody leaves those areas, right? All in by design. 2018, of course, another plan comes to demolish Skid Row. And they may not be straightforward saying they want to demolish Skid Row, but like that is the plan. Like, how do we get these people out of here, and how do we quarantine? Well, that plan was basically, they were going to introduce and I believe it was the entirety of the area of Skid Row and let me see if I can get a better picture of Skid Row, so when we talk about it, we can kind of be looking at it together. Okay, so, and I'll explain what this is, but these are some laser zone maps. But when we think about Skid Row, it's like right here, right? So this is Main Street. This is where the buffer zones that Tiff was talking about, 7th Street. And then you come down to Alameda, which is down, where am I? Why am I not seeing Alameda? Alameda is somewhere think just past Central over here. So, and down there, and then you get over to 3rd Street, right? And all that area, it was the traditional, informal boundaries of Skid Row that was in the compromise of the Blue Book. And that was the 1976 plan. So 2018, what they started talking about was like, oh, and see, and what's so fucked up about it is the way they describe it. Like, we need to share the burden. Like, we can't have concentrated poverty in one area. Other cities and other communities need to help with this burden, right? And that's how they're describing it. And they also, like, we need to open up this space so that kids and children can be here, because the demonization of Skid Row, from being, TB infested to homeless property being, not real property, having like through the Levan injunction, having to prove that people who are unhoused actually have valuable property was having to be fought, that people who were homeless through the Jones Act had the right to sleep and to rest, right? So there's been all these efforts within the community of Skid Row to fight for the right to be seen, the right to be human, and the right to, to the point where you want to sleep, and the right to own property. And this has been the work of groups like Los Angeles Community Action Network. And so in 2018, they're like, well, let's just open it up to market rate housing, which is very scary, because when you're an organization that wants to do supportive, single room occupancy hotels, you're not going to have massive amounts of funders wanting to like give you money that can compete with real estate, giants who want to bring in multi-million-dollar complexes. You're trying to provide not only housing, but supportive housing, right? Where there's medical treatment, mental health treatment, that there's case managers for you to help you maintain your housing and to thrive, in your community. So that plan, I believe, got like kind of pushed aside. You can look back in LA Times in 2018. And then now at the end of last year in 2020, I believe it was last year. Okay, I can't remember. Anyways, the time period that we're in now, they've come back with their new plan. And so what's significant about it, and what Steve drew our attention to, it's not so much what they're doing outside, because the policing is the same, right? The targeting has always been there. But it's, again, like the tricks that they're playing with it, right? They're like, oh, we got to spread it. We got to we got to give our talking points differently to the community. Like, we need to spread the burden, right? So like now people are burdenless, they're not only not human, but they're burdenless, right? And we're going to allow for affordable housing to be concentrated in only one area of Skid Row, which will be now San Pedro to 3rd, which will be somewhere around here, to Alameda, which is down here. So this area right here is where they're talking about wanting affordable housing, when before I told you Skid Row, 7th here to 5th or to 3rd Street up over here down to here used to be all. And so now we're talking about reducing it to about 2/3 of the original size of where the community is at, right? So and so that's completely banishing people, because where are people going to go, right? So our part of the story, and I'm going to kind of transition a little bit, is not so much getting into the nitty-gritty of all the evil real estate developers that are probably a part of this, which is part of what we want to learn as like comrades in this fight. Maybe not so much like we're not knowing every single city ordinance, which we are learning, but and that's kind of not necessarily our fight either. Like, our housing comrades are really like, they're doing that work, but our work is to show how what the policing is changing and how it's looking in conjunction. So I'm glad I'm on this page, and I'm just going to talk for maybe like 5 more minutes. Is that okay, Tiff? Can I get 5 more minutes? Yeah. So this is the central division, what I was talking about, Skid Row. In 2018, I was talking about these laser zones, right? That Operation Laser, LA Strategic Extraction and Restoration, which was created by LAPD with this with a contractor by the name of Craig Uchida, to form these things that are called laser zones, areas where they're going to police and then names of people they're going to police and look for in these areas. So person and place-based policing. So when we think back, so this plan, and I'll come up here real quick because I just want to, like, we got this through one of our public records requests. So this is the March 2018 Central Division laser zone plan, right? It's their Operation Laser Plan. So in 2018, the city announces its new plan to open up market rate housing. Well, when we look at where the laser zone's at, and we even compare it to the current plan, the proposed laser zones, because we ended up dismantling this program, are right in this area right here, right where they're gonna where they want to open up Skid Row to market rate housing, right? Because right now it's industrial zoned. It's the Wiggins, there's the Wiggins settlement, that certain single occupancy hotels, and an SROs that can't be fucked with, right? But now what will happen in this new rezoning is that all this area can be opened up to market rate housing. And lo and behold, the laser zones are right in the heart of Skid Row. When you look down San Pedro has nothing but social services, convenience stores, SRO housing, and this is the whole area that that they planned on basically attacking. When we look at the other components of these programs, and I'm going to show this real quick too, because this is always just good for me to look at. I look at it all the time, especially in these talks with folks. But when we look at these areas, another component of the Operation Laser were the anchor points. And anchor points were like these micro hotspots within the laser zones or around the laser zones. And so we're looking right now at downtown, but this is Skid Row down here, right? So Main Street is, where is Main Street? Main Street is here, right? Central Alameda is here. So this is Skid Row right here. But right up here is the gentrifying downtown. And this little area right here, this is all single room occupancy. And in fact, this Main Street one up here used to be the Roslyn, not the hotel, was the Roslyn, it used to be the Frontier, and now is the Roslyn Lofts, and it's super yuppie. And you go across the way, and this was the Roslyn Hotel, and this is where basically like a lot of LA Can members live there. And up here is the Alexandria, a lot of LA Can members live up here. So what's so significant about that is that the anchor points almost work in two folds. They either protect property that's attempting to be gentrified, which when we look at this one that's circled down here, Maple and 7th, this area is a high rise, there's a projected like luxury loft to be built there. So they're either around areas that they're trying to protect or areas that are used to being policed. And single room occupancy hotels, the Frontier Hotel, went through a massive CNAP or citywide nuisance abatement program like assault. And one of the things why we bring Steve Diaz on is because he tells the story of the Frontier apartment very well, because it was very much a part of that fight to preserve, the fact that poor people could live there. And they actually had gone so far as having separate entrances of people who were more wealthy that could enter into one area, and people who were, having subsidized housing or affordable housing being enter into another area. So you see how these anchor points are kind of also spread out through downtown. These are the concentrated predpol hotspots. Remember how I said we also received those ones? Well, remember when we were talking, Tiff was talking about the buffer zones, right? The buffer zones, like when you think about Main Street, you think about Alameda, you think about 7th, and you think about 3rd. When they talked about the buffer zones in 1976, they actually had UCLA students follow people who were poor, unhoused, and followed them around to see how far out of Skid Row they would go, because they wanted to create almost an outdoor carceral space for people so they would never want to leave, right? They would have their home, they would have their food, they would have their free services, and then they would never leave. So they would monitor to see how far out of the area they would go. So when you think about these predpol hotspots, this is protecting the buffer zones. This is encircling the space and that agreement in 1976, where the city agreed to contain Skid Row, and it's not like they weren't doing it before. They were doing it before, but it's like they kind of formalized it a little bit more and moved the different Union Mission and Salvation Armies further into Skid Row in order to, seduce, communities away from the areas that they were trying to gentrify in downtown into the actual like heart of Skid Row now, when we think about where San Pedro and 6th Street is. So when I look at this now, and this is what I'm saying, like, part of me is very glad I arrived, but also really like, Jamie, this was like 5 years ago that you did this. You should have known this. But I'm glad that I arrived still in really understanding, and understanding downtown, understanding Skid Row, but realizing that predpol hotspots were really just continuing the legacy of the buffer zones. And so this is again of 2018, when we see this is all the gentrifying area. And this is Skid Row that's down here that we know has the reset program. We know the bids are down here. And the buffer zones, again, are being protected by the predpol hotspots. And so if you don't know what predpol is predpol hotspots would, line officers would be given mission sheets with predpol hotspots and be told to patrol those areas. So this was just a managerial tool to make sure those buffer zones were being, managed. And so then again, remember I told you about these anchor points. Now, when we put them together, you start to see like, okay, they're maintaining the buffer zones, and now they're targeting areas that are going into Skid Row, right? Especially the areas up here, single room occupancy, and these ones are all San Pedro, right? San Pedro Avenue. And I think that's the last one, but when we think back, the laser zones now that they wanted to use are down right about here, I believe, right around here. And these laser zones come into this area that they want to clear. And so what I don't want to give the impression is that that blank space isn't being policed. It's just not being policed by by predpol. Right, predpol's like, we got the buffer zones. Operation Lasers like, we're going in for the kill, right? We're gonna cut up the land and we're gonna tell them exactly where we want them to patrol. And then we have these micro hotspots called anchor points where we're gonna get them through. And that was the other piece I left out, that the interventions in anchor points were evictions, abatements, or changing the environment to make it easier to police, okay? So now we have the 2020 or the 2040 plan, and it's all coming together, right? Just like it always has. And one thing Steve always taught us, housing policies and policing policies and the city lays down the municipal codes, right? Go hand in hand. And one thing is that when you think about that infamous criminalization of homeless folks with 4118D, the no sit, sleep, or no sit, sleep, or rest on the sidewalks, that was instituted in 1967, right? And that's really significant because they had the authority to do the sweeps already. So the idea of sweeping unhoused folks out of certain areas was always done. The idea of broken windows policing always occurred. What we're seeing with the intellectualization of policing is the idea that they can formalize it to sell it to people. So they sell the concept or the idea of broken windows policing, which formalizes if you police misdemeanors, right? Now it's like getting specific. You will prevent violent crimes, part 1, part 2, violent crimes. And predictive policing is like, well, now we're going to bring in all the crime data, and the crime data is going to tell us where to go. So they're formalizing a practice that has existed since the inception of Skid Row, because the actual expansion of the LA jails occurred in the 1930s, 1940s, maybe more 1950s, for white adult males who were getting arrested for drunkenness, because Skid Row used to be just filled with a lot of white men. And they were the ones that kind of started the expansion of the jails. Not that ever, and to never ever be misunderstood, that the population of Black folks in LA at that time always was disproportionately impacted, if I'm saying that right. That they were always, there was always, maybe there was like, you know, a couple hundred Black folks. Well, there was always like the majority of the Black folks in prison, but because there were so many white men there, they were filling the prisons or the jails. So that idea of sweeping up poor people, putting them in jail has always existed, right? The idea of containing and putting folks in a certain area and trying to make them not leave has always existed. But since 1950, right, when they wanted to just get rid of Skid Row, they tried that in 1970 to get rid of Skid Row, and they're trying it again. So what we're trying to do is fight for the right to remain. And the right to remain, and I'm going to just show this thing real quick, and then I'm going to stop because I think I said 5 minutes, and now it's not 5 minutes. Let me just hold on real quick. Let me just show all the talking points, because I want folks to be sure that we stay tuned into what's going on with Skid Row, and know what LA Can and folks are doing so that you can get your voices heard and fight for the right to remain. So the coalition is, there's several coalitions, right? There's the Skid Row Now 2040 coalition, and basically no net loss of affordable housing, anti-displacement protections, no changes to Skid Row boundaries, like this this IX1 zone. Like, no, we're keeping Skid Row as a community. It's the boundaries that we've stated, Main Street to Alameda, 3rd to 7th. That is Skid Row, you know, increasing arts and cultures, green space, sanitation, neighborhood maintenance, health and wellness. And last, I want to show, this was a letter that went out. The coalition signed on to this letter. We just didn't get our logo in there on time. But the coalition to look for is the Central City United Coalition. That also is in conjunction with those as well. So, so keep your eyes out for that. We definitely are getting into the social media for that. And making sure that we're supporting that, because part of our talking points, and we were able to speak at last Thursday's Planning Commission meeting where they first heard the new plan again, and they heard a lot from the Central City United Coalition and the right to remain struggle we were able to speak, and we were able to start talking about the continued use of police and violence to banish people, because there's nowhere for anybody to go, right? Everyone who works on any kind of homeless rights, or basically works on any kind of housing rights issues around homelessness, knows that there's like 60,000 people homeless in LA County. So there's nowhere for anybody to go. And the only route is to build affordable housing. And what we are saying is no to the continuation of the policing and the violent banishment of people. So that's kind of stuff of what Steve and I have been talking about, and what, you know, Tiff has been doing so much research around looking at the, like, you know, the other types of policing programs that have come in and, you know, have, you know, created laws basically to have people policed. And yeah, so it's been super amazing, and really just, I feel very fortunate to be having these conversations and to be a part of this struggle.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for sharing all of that information with us, and for giving us that update and overview. And yeah, I definitely want to encourage folks to join with us if you want to be a part of that continued conversation and that research. That would be a part of our Land and Policing Working Group. And we are continuing to meet. We meet every month about that, and just continuing to do that research on historically what the development of Skid Row has meant for folks, how folks have been policed, and also looking at kind of what is happening presently. And that's just, as Jamie was just describing, that is really, it's always been relevant, but of course it's extremely relevant right now because of what Jamie was just describing, and the redevelopment plan 2040 that folks are pushing back on. And we do want to be supporting our partners in that, supporting folks in the Skid Row community. And one question I have for folks who perhaps, like, I was on the call for that hearing, but I wasn't able to stay on the whole time, but I did hear that I believe the plan was next, like it was being presented. I believe that it is next going to City Council, or I guess my question is anyone on the call with us today aware of what that next step is, or is that something that we can just check on ourselves and maybe update folks on?
Yeah, I still believe it's in the planning commission because I think they still have to, because yesterday was like, or that last Thursday was a long discussion. I had to jump off too. It was like an 8-hour morning. So it was a very long call for your 1 minute to speak. So from what I was under the impression is that there was a discussion, and I don't think it was an approval of the plan yet, because the planning commission has to approve it and approve it, sending it to the city council. So I think it still has another round of discussions and hearings from, but that's, yeah, but we'll definitely stay in touch with Steve to find out when the next mobilization is for that.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much. All right, so moving on from there, I think what we will do is we're going to transition to talking about, and again, thank you so much, Jamie, for sharing that information. I think we're going to transition to updates on our from our working group. And so this would be when we're talking about, we do have a number of working groups, but we're talking specifically about the data-informed community-focused policing working group. And with that, we have been, we've kind of been delving into, again, I'll just know what that is. It's delving into and kind of learning more about LAPD's most recent version of data-driven policing that was launched in 2020. And that was launched in response to their previous data-driven programs, so-called data-driven programs, being shut down after being exposed by the community and by the coalition for the harm that they were doing, and for the rights, the way that folks' rights were being violated. So so the data-informed community-focused policing, which is a very fancy name, is what came out in response to that. And what I'll do is I'll provide just a little brief overview about a little bit more about just what that is. And then what we'll do is we do have folks with us today who have been kind of working on different things, or will be able, I think, to provide updates about some of the, again, records requests that we've been working on, some of the things that we've been learning. And this is just a good way for us to be kind of talking about it with each other, to be sharing the things that we're learning, and also kind of, again, letting folks know what are some of the different ways that folks can be getting involved. So that's kind of what we'll be doing for the next section of the meeting. And so as far as data-informed community-focused policing, some ways to understand that are just to understand, like, as I said, it was a replacement to the previous programs, but like fundamentally, it is the same as, it's the same as what policing has always been. You know, and when we say data-driven policing or surveillance, it's like that has the connotation of, you know, being connected to technology, like surveillance, like digital surveillance. But of course, surveillance, you know, since the beginning of time just means like watching a person, tracking, spying a person, you know, just with your eyes, or just like going by and seeing what's going on. So these are, again, these are elements, what the elements of this program today, the 2020 version, are the same elements of what policing has always been. And that's important for us to understand how it's like the same. And then also, of course, what does it mean when it gets updated, and when it gets sped up, and when it gets broadened and gets more funding, and when it takes on different language. But when we talk about like the fundamentally what it is, it's about, so it's about the surveillance of communities, first of all, and specifically who gets surveilled the most, who gets the most suspicion and attention put on them. That would be surveillance of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor communities. as well as folks that are disabled, migrants, trans and queer folks, and those are folks who are predominantly surveilled. It's also about the gathering of information and then the sharing of information with the intent to cause harm. So the gathering of information to be kind of put together or used against the community or against those folks that are wanting to be, that are wanting to be invisibilized or removed or displaced, using that data against folks. And it's also about kind of data-informed community-focused policing is about also wrapping all of that we just described, which again are kind of the fundamental elements of policing, wrapping that in this language of, oh, but it's data-driven and it's objective, and also adding in this element of community policing. And it's right there in the name, like saying, oh, we're doing this together with community, and we have community centers, and these are the different things that we're doing in the community. So it's kind of wrapping it in that language of community policing and being data-driven to kind of defend against all of the things that gets said that gets said about policing that is true, and that is that it is of course racist. It is very biased against folks that are indigenous and poor communities, and so just like pushing back on that as well. So that is kind of an overview of what data-informed community-focused policing is. We have been learning more about it by going through some of the documents that we did get from LAPD. So we've been learning kind of about what are the different components of it. We've been seeing how they really compare, just line up very much exactly with the previous policing programs. And again, that was Operation Laser and with Predpol as well. And mostly Operation Laser is how they line up the most. So seeing how it really is kind of a replacement for that. And when we talk about that, because that is something that we talk about a lot, how similar they are and how like one program just follows the other. I really want to add into that because I think that can sometimes be like discouraging when we talk about it that way. But as we go, of course, and as we do, like as we shut down these previous programs, we're building power in terms of understanding how to expose them, how folks are being harmed, able to share out that information about how that's going on, and also to push back on the basic fundamental ideology of these programs, and to be demonstrating that, that these replacements are not better, and to be calling them out for exactly what they are, which is kind of the same thing, but kind of updated with new technology, updated with different names, but basically the same fundamental ideology. So we can be calling that out as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about data-informed community-focused policing. But at this point, I did want to, I believe we have Sabrina with us today. We also have Amira with us. And Sabrina, if you're able to share the trifold that we've been working on. We have been working on like creating a little trifold. If folks are familiar perhaps with the one that we did for Operation Laser, it was just like a little thing that we used to kind of help explain. This is kind of the way the system is laid out. Not that, folks are unfamiliar with these concepts. Folks are very familiar with these concepts, but I think it's really to kind of give us an idea of like, okay, like when they talk about, the ACCIC is like, what is that? And like, what is, neighborhood engagement area? Like, how do these all fit together? The idea of this brochure is to be like, oh, okay, like this is kind of what we're talking about with all this terminology. So I would love to hear folks' feedback on it. It's very much a work in progress, and but I say that with pride. I think it's I didn't mean that in a demeaning way, that it's a work in progress, but it's a very good work in progress. It's a great starting point. We'd love to hear what folks think about it. And looks like Sabrina is, I believe Sabrina is ready to go. So I will hand it over to Sabrina at this point, who has been working on this with us. Thank you.
Yeah, so I also want to shout out Mark for helping us really kind of pull all of this together. He wasn't able to join us today, but he did a great job kind of pulling together all of our ideas for this. So this will end up becoming a brochure kind of folded in 3. So we have the front page, a community guide to data-driven community-focused policing, and that'll open up to this section that's on the left of the first page, where Tiff gave a really great description of what the program is and some of the history and who it's targeting. And part of what data-informed community-focused policing works through is LAPD uses a problem-solving model known as SARA. So we go and define what is SARA, and that breaks down to scanning, analysis, response, and assessment. And so what we've done is we've kind of redefined what each of those steps stands for in terms of like how it affects the community, right? So scanning we've redefined as spying and surveillance, analysis is targeting and criminalization, response as patrolling and arresting, and then assessment as the pseudoscience and attempted legitimization. And what we did with that was try to break it down more into the second page, which is what the brochure would open up to kind of give a visual map of how that process works. And this is one of the parts that's still really much a work in progress, is how do we put so much into the restricted space, and then how do we make it maybe not so just wordy, but more personal to the people in the community that we would be handing this out to help them learn about how this process works. So under scanning, right now we just have community safety partnerships, but we know there's a lot more that goes into that, such as just the regular foot patrols and the CCTVs, and we have the helicopters. So we have some of the visuals here, but we do need to expand a little bit more on the wording, at least, as to what that surveillance looks like. Right, we go down into the analysis. You can see the surveillance centers, the different examples of that and how that connects. The analysis, the targeting criminalization analysis, and how LAPD kind of consolidates all of that community scanning information into the databases, and then how that affects the response, which is really like the missions, the patrols, the arrests, and the different programs that they actually use in the community. And then finally, we have, again, here at the bottom, assessment, which is the kind of pseudoscience and trying to prove that what they've been doing is on the right path, that they are somehow reducing crime or making a positive impact in the community. And they're really just kind of continuing to use like that dirty data to continue to support themselves to do more of that, right? And so we're still building on this. This is kind of one of the first drafts that we have so far. And like I said, Mark did a really great job putting this together. And so, yeah, if anybody has any feedback, anything that they'd like to see, one of the things we talked about maybe adding would be adding more like anecdotes or like case studies into maybe like how this process works. But we've kind of just started talking about that. So if anyone has any feedback or questions, feel free.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. And if we could leave that up there, that would be great, actually, just for now. Yeah, that is, I like that color version. That looks really good. And also, I believe we have Amira with us as well. Mm-hmm. Let me just check. Amira, if you would like to perhaps give a comment at all, but please don't feel. But sorry.
Could also add, because I think you mentioned earlier about how this work might combine or build on some of the public requests or public records requests that have been done. So I think we could mention just that the SARA, though it is not new, it does seem to be a sort of pivot focus now that laser is no longer a program that is viable for LAPD. It seems like SARA is getting some of that energy or some of that attention. And so we have submitted a public records for that. And that's, I think, part of what we're in, another reason why we use that framework here, because it's a focus of the DICFP, the Data Informed Community Focused Policing language and manual that has more recently come out. So yeah, it was just, as Sabrina had mentioned, just trying to take each of those acronyms that the LAPD came up with: scanning, analysis, response, and assessment, and then really trying to think through what that actually looks like on the ground. So yeah, I think it would be great to hear, for instance, if scanning is surveillance, and that could be, as Tiff and Sabrina mentioned, any kinds of surveillance, from foot patrols and points of contact there. The idea is that any data that is gathered from that point of surveillance then goes into the it comes out of in the analysis phase in some form. So an example could be like the mission sheets that are produced that then inform what patrols are going to be doing or focusing on in the response section, which of course the LAPD is describing in very different ways. So that was just building on or repeating much of what you both had already said, but yeah.
Thank you so much, Amira, and Sabrina as well. And thanks, folks. I see a couple comments in the chat here. Sorry for my finger as I'm like doing this on my phone. And I see Jamie's question about the definitions and how we chose each of the words that we feel should be listed. And I feel like, and again, Amira or Sabrina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that was just through conversation. It was like, these are the things that have come up the most, and just taking a closer look at what we selected. Yeah, and it looks like we still have to fill some out here, but yeah, I think some of these are like the acronyms that get kind of thrown around and used the most. And I don't know how other folks feel about it, but like I find it very like distancing when there's just a lot of jargon about you know, and using acronyms. So it's you know, as much as we hate to kind of take on the language that the police are using or that the city is using, it's good to be just very familiar with what they're talking about. Like we see citywide nuisance abatement program, CNAP. That was a very critical program. You know, it's not new. I think it began in the 90s, and that is a citywide, or I'm sorry, it's like a 5 different. It includes like the city attorney's office. It includes LAPD. And 3 other departments that kind of join together to basically collaborate on how to label certain locations as nuisances, and kind of work together to use city resources and use kind of any way that they could, like LAPD surveillance, like orders from the city to displace folks. So that's what citywide nuisance abatement is, which is one of the definitions that we see on there. And that is being used very much today. It's being used very much against the Black community, against Black trans community, against sex workers. These are essentially, these are like definitions of some of the tools that are being used against folks, being weaponized against folks, and also like some of those data processing hubs. So it's kind of it's a whole mixture of things. Yeah, Jamie, did you have any thoughts on maybe what else should be included, or have folks like maybe, I mean, maybe folks have also heard some terminology that they would like more information on, or feel like we should be talking about more. So I'll just pause for a moment and see if folks have any other comments or questions as well.
Yeah, I was going to share a couple of things, and yeah, this is, by the way, just looking awesome, and I think it's just going to be a great tool for just like, yeah, even like just a reference point or something to point to or walk through, like the kind of process of how this works, and show the journey of how things that just begin as surveillance, or that are kind of, that people might understand as this abstract just thing happening, or just, you know, they know there's cameras but don't really know the process beyond cameras, and or the architecture of like, so how that's all traveling, and how that is really deliberately through this like intentional step-by-step kind of process, this machine is becoming criminalization, as well as then through the last step, like this like kind of program of controlling society and yeah, kind of social and racial control. So yeah, this is awesome. And this is my first time seeing it in color, and I agree, it looks really good in color. So the two things, yeah, kind of looking at it, and I'm glad y'all are sharing it, is, so one thing is, yeah, on the what is Sarah, I was thinking, I mean, what Amira was sharing about what the Sarah method is, like the history of it and how it's been used in different things over time and the way it's incorporated into data-informed community-focused policing today. I mean, that's mentioned at the end there, but I think like a little just blurb on that might be good in the what is Sarah box, just because like now we, like, you know, the folks in this work group, we've heard it enough that we know it as, this is, I guess, either like a police methodology or maybe broader methodology used in other contexts too, but that's what it is. And Amira just explained it. I don't think it needs to be any more level of detail than the way you explained it, Amira. But like that kind of introduction to what it is and how it, like why we're even talking about it, kind of like why we're looking at it, might be helpful in that box. Or just, yeah, somewhere up there. So it's like, you know, like where have we seen it, like even, yeah, that it's part of that informed community focused policing. It's a methodology that's used in these ways. I think that might be more, because on the back page, the page with the pictures, there is this, you know, breakdown analysis, kind of, you know, our narration of what the 4 things are. So that, you know, exists on the next page. And so yeah, so that's kind of, I think that background that Amira gave might be good to have in here somehow. And then, yeah, I know we were talking about this a bit last night, a couple of us, like Tiff and Sabrina and stuff. So I'm just looking at it now, and I'm trying to, I think it helps that it's in color, but I'm like trying to think of, on the back, like I love what this is doing of, yeah, taking those terms that sound kind of innocuous or whatever the fuck they, like scanning means, and, you know, that doesn't sound like much, but then really breaking it down and explaining that, okay, this is what surveillance is, this is what the analysis means. You know, I think there's a lot going on the page, and so I don't want to, I guess I've, you know, already said, oh, maybe we can add another thing, but, and I'm recognizing also that this is a tool, this doesn't need to be a comprehensive, you know, full guide to it. It's more like a little tool that's in your hands that you can use to, you know, talk and explain. As well as, I know y'all mentioned you're working on like slides and kind of workshops and other presentations that this could be the basis from. But for those 4 scanning analysis, like the, like each of those boxes, I'm wondering if, I'm trying to think if there's a way to like give really a couple like really concrete and just like everyday type examples, you know, so that, and that's maybe captured in the photos and you know, there's the different pieces, but like, and I think it's good to know about the record management system and what all that is, but I think even more important, or more that I think will help bring it to life, is like, for example, in the analysis section, if it's like explains like an LAPD officer is like sitting in a fusion center doing this, like watching these cameras, or like kind of an active form of like X is doing this. And like, so even in the first thing, it's like, you know, LAPD cameras are watching license plates, and or camera, like CCTV cameras are capturing faces that can be searched on facial recognition. Like those just, and in really plain terms and like kind of active terms, I think helps like bring to life how this operates and how it flows. And I think it'd be cool to include it here, though, of course, as I said, like, I know that this is a tool that you know, when people are telling the story and using it to discuss how these programs work, you'll obviously be giving those examples, but if it's possible to include some of them to bring it to life a little more, that could be cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that feedback. I jotted down some of those notes, and yeah, if folks have additional feedback, we would be happy to hear about that. Because yeah, this is a work in progress, and we want to know what makes sense for folks. We want to know if this is these are useful ways to be talking about all of this, and also what folks want more information on.
And could I add, Tiff, maybe another thing we could ask for feedback on, and maybe you already said this, I apologize if you did, but then I think we were thinking of this as an initial quick, shorter thing, but we were also thinking of a longer, more developed thing as well that maybe would take the form of a zine or something, but maybe that would be great to get feedback on on what formats and what kinds of materials folks think will be useful.
Can I also, I think, make a suggestion? I think just well, first, just building on Amira's point, it would be really awesome. Sorry, just a bunch of cop cars. They must know the coalition is having a meeting. So maybe if for like posting it on the website, I'm just wondering that for more details as well, like for more details, we can also offer that click here and people can go to the stuff where this can lead to a sort of a larger piece that Amira was referring to. So that'd be really awesome. And just on the just on an organizational side, if there's a way to, and we can probably reduce the logo a little bit and just put the contact info. So if folks want to just go to the website and just an email address and there's just a social media handle. So this way, if people want to reach out, they can also hit us up as well.
Okay, sorry, folks. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, thank you, Hamid. Was just sharing the meeting information with someone who was trying to log on. So yes, I know. I also had that thought about the coalition symbol, which is awfully large. So yeah, that could that's some good feedback. Welcome, Chella. I think we have just been joined by Chella. Yes.
Yeah,
welcome.
I am so sorry. I'm actually in the middle of cleaning, like real talk. So you're gonna hear me bumping stuff and be like, "Okay, I'll answer the question," but I'm muting.
All right. We're just glad that you can join us, Chella. So thank you so much for making the time. And so just to get folks situated on kind of where we are in the meeting. So we have been, so far in the meeting, we've been, this is our meeting where we talk about data-informed community focus. I'm sorry, it's the meeting where we talk about the fight against data-driven policing. It feels like a data-informed community-focused policing meeting because that's what we've been talking a lot about. That's just like the most recent version of what LAPD is doing. But so we've just been talking about the trifold and kind of going over that outreach material. We do have some additional updates that we wanted to share with folks. But if we could, I did want to pivot to kind of go back to bringing Chella into the conversation because we're just so glad that that Chella is able to join us, and we wanted to make sure that we had enough time to be talking with Chella. So if it's okay with folks, and I hope it is, I think we'll just what we'll do is we'll have our conversation with Chella now, and then we'll also we'll spend some time at the end. I think we'll still have time to getting updates from folks about what's going on with some of our other with some of our other actions and work as well. So yeah, so yeah, again, we're really excited that Chella can join us. We, as folks know, June is Pride Month, and we wish folks a happy Pride Month. But as we talk about Pride and as we, talk about this celebration, we have to also acknowledge how, as we're talking about the celebration of gayness and queerness and being intersex and non-binary, how we have to acknowledge how race intersects with that as well, and what that means in terms of who is able to kind of be out and celebrating and enjoying that experience and enjoying their identity and really celebrating that, and who is not able to do that as much, and who may be actually policed and harmed for their identity. So thank you so much, Sabrina. And so this, and it also fits into our conversation that we've been having about land and policing, because as land is policed and as locations are policed, it does have an impact, some of the ways that folks are policed, in terms of like the scanning that we were just talking about when we're looking at, the way that people are surveilled and policed, the scanning of communities, the way information is gathered and used against communities, the way police, issue their missions and who gets targeted, the way different task forces are set up to target folks. All of that does have an impact that is disproportionate and very dangerous, in terms of inflicting harm on folks in the Black and queer community and the trans community, and on queer and trans sex workers as well. And it's important that we acknowledge that as we seek to understand more about that harm, as we're talking about the impact of policing and as we're seeking to shut down these policing programs. And so, yeah, with that, that's kind of why we wanted to have the conversation. It's always something, it's not just for this month, it's for all the time. It's something we always want to be talking about and learning more about and acknowledging. And I would just love to welcome Chella to the conversation. And Chella, there are so many things that you are involved with, and but kind of what springs to mind most recently, or you can tell me if you'd rather start by talking about something else, but what springs to mind most recently is what happened at the Pride Parade and your shutdown of the intersection. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about that and what happened.
Yes. Thank you for having me, y'all. First of all, I want to acknowledge I am on Tongva land. My name's Chella, for those that don't know me. For those who know, I've been a part of the Stop LAPD Spying, or as me and my friends jokingly call it, slapped, for a minute. And I've been a part of them for 8 years, I think. And I actually do live in Skid Row, and I'm an organizer. I like to fuck shit up. That's what I like to say. I know this is being recorded. I don't give a fuck. Baba knows how real I am. Hamid, sorry, call him Baba, but he's Hamid. Okay, so y'all, I would be in the wrong not to remember of thinking about who started Pride. It was like, folks like Silver Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, and thinking about a bunch of like trans elders who have started in that movement, who have, been pushed out of the spotlight because of white supremacy and capitalism, let's be real. So thinking of Pride specifically, just like being real, I used to go, and I used to actually go to the event where, for those who haven't gone to an actual Pride event, usually there's vendors, and it does cost. It costs $20. It used to cost $20, and I think the last time they were upping it to like $35 or some shit like that. And like you go in, and like there's alcohol, there's naked men and women and other genders being naked and having fun, and I'm all for that. I'm all for folks being who they are, right? But we have to remember who the narrative belongs to, and who that narrative particularly serves. It serves Coors Light. It serves the Coca-Cola industry. It serves McDonald's and all these like different things that like support the new Jim Crow and the war in Palestine and all these different things that are not liberatory, right? Because I am a Black trans woman, I do think of things on an intersectional level. And I just want to think last year, We were invited by a friend who works at Trans Latina Coalition to like, you know, do something, you know, and so we pretty much took over the space, you know. I'm saying we as in my band and I, and a lot of other folks who are quote unquote leftists, or folks who actually give a shit about, you know, who actually really believe Black Lives Matter, who actually really believe not one more. We took over space and we reclaimed that space for Black trans women, for brown trans women, for undocumented folks, you know, and then being inclusive of differently able-bodied folks, as I am differently abled, right? And this year it was a lot different because there was nothing that we were opposing last year. We were opposing the corporate side of Pride, and also there's a word, it's a sneaky word where people sneak in, co-optation, there you go. The co-optation of Black Lives Matter and using George Floyd and, you know, all the others who have died last year as a way to like, oh, let's rebrand ourselves. And so we were against that, you know, we were against the co-optation, we were against the collusion with police. That's what was happening. Folks were like sending messages to police and then trying to have them come secretly. And so we were like, fuck that shit. This is stuff we don't like, you know? And so this year, it wasn't like that. It was just, I wanted to do a Pride. I wanted to be real, you know, get some folks, including myself, because I'm low income, getting some folks paid. I wanted to like use my band because I'm in a band, y'all. My band is called You Guys Suck. Like real hard, shut the fuck up, thanks. We are very punk. We're an all trans band. My drummer's trans, white. My bassist is and other vocalist is a Black trans man. And then my other vocalist and guitarist is also a Black trans man. And so, you know, I just think about ways to like support ourselves and support those who are around us. And also just throw pride. Let's be real. Like it means something to reclaim pride and to reclaim pride, not just for trans people, but for all people, especially Black and Indigenous people, right? It meant something for me to like be able to talk about. You know, I was even mentioning some of the surveillance tactics that they be using because sheriffs came out. The sheriffs came out this year too, like just like last year, they came out this year. And so like thinking of all the things I've learned at Stop LAPD Spying in LA Can, and even being able to bring that in, right? So yeah, I think there's something really powerful when we reclaim space, where we talk about like honestly putting our hearts and our lives on the line and just, you know, rocking the fuck out, you know. It is part of something I call queer apocalypse, which is, I like to call it a festival that likes to flip over the white cis hegemony, you know, and flip it on its fucking head. And we are totally anti-cop. We don't allow cops in our spaces. We don't allow folks that like will call cops in our spaces. We believe in keeping each other safe. We believe in keeping each other good. Yeah, and spreading that message. I think that's it. What else should I talk about, Tiff?
Hi, Chella. Thanks so much. And I think that's really great. I do have a couple more questions for you, but I also just wanted to encourage folks, if you also have questions for Chella, you could pop them in the chat, or you know, there's just a small group of us here. If you'd like to just raise your hand or indicate that you have a question, that would work too. I know folks, Hamid, Shakir, Jamie, who are with us on the call today, were actually at that event. So if you all have anything you wanted to kind of lift or share in terms of just like, I just, yeah, I wish I could have been there myself. So I'm just would love to hear, hear from folks as well who were there and just kind of what their thoughts were. It just sounds like a very, very powerful event. We know it is building off of something that you did last year as well, as you mentioned. And yeah, I'll just maybe pause and see if we have any questions. And then, like I said, I do have a couple more questions myself, but I'll just pause for a moment. Okay,
While we
so
are waiting for questions, I want to also talk about the fact that this is not the first time we've done it. It's not the only space we've done it in. We've done it in Echo Park, where we did a Trans Day of Vengeance event in November of last year. We also threw a Vogue ball for those who like watch Pose. We did a ball. We threw a ball, and we called it Cancel the Rent Ball. Challenging Mitchell Farrell. And we're actually doing another ball coming next month. It's called Swallow Your Pride Ball. So more information about that. But like we've been doing takeovers for a minute, and we even took over the streets of Skid Row, for my B-day, for my birthday. So I just want to let y'all know that. Y'all have any questions, let me know. Muting.
thank you, Chella. Yeah, and one question that we definitely have that we would love for you to share with folks is what are ways that folks can support you and support your work. So, and we do mean that in terms of, I mean that in terms of monetarily, like how are folks able to just directly send you money, or what are other ways that, that you would suggest that is supportive of your work. So please let us know that. But also we were just kind of bringing us back to a conversation we were having earlier on this call. We were talking about, you were talking about kind of the transformation of downtown LA and how that has, of course, happened over a number of decades, and how that has been the result of, redevelopment and gentrification, and what that has meant for the changing landscape of the Skid Row community in terms of like folks getting displaced, folks getting evicted, more policing coming in, because as Steve Diaz with LA Can will remind us, every time you have, with redevelopment, with any kind of building or gentrification, of course, there comes in this, more police to make these new white people feel safe and to protect, so-called protect the businesses. So you have this influx of policing as well, and that is designed to displace and to make folks that are the existing residents there feel unsafe and to feel uncomfortable, and to be moving folks. So that was kind of a part of what we were talking about earlier. And as you mentioned, you are a resident of Skid Row, and if what are your thoughts, or what has your experience been in terms of how that how the landscape has been transforming over the past few years, or just any comment you have about that?
Well, definitely seeing more security, privately owned security, patrol. My neighborhood is something I've seen. Definitely just want to acknowledge that like living in Skid Row is a complex city, right? Like I'm a believer that we cannot talk about state violence without talking about communal violence, which in itself is created by the state, right? So we have to think around like mental health services not really being needed, not really being provided. I feel like folks are real quick to call police when things even look a little hairy. So police are very much, I see a lot of policing. I see a lot of It's crazy because I was just like, there are times when I'm gonna be real, I get drunk and I don't want to be in my apartment. So I sit in the lobby to look, at people walk by. And I was just, been commenting that like literally there's not as many people as there used to be. Oh my God. Hold on, sorry. Are you okay? I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, there's not as many people as there usually is. Sorry, like I have someone helping me clean and they're, just want to acknowledge that. So like thinking around that, thinking around accessibility for disabled folks as well, it has not and will not ever be solved until they start putting more ramps. But yeah, I think more policing, I think private security, I think the pushing out of like homeless folks is something, I think that's one of the reasons, and I do want to say like, it's funny because I do still see the pharmacists, if y'all know what I mean. There's still pharmacists that come and do their thing, and excuse me, I support that. You gotta make your money. We all gotta survive under this capitalistic system. And so yeah, that's what I see.
Awesome, thank you so much. Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to raise was just acknowledge that you are a part of one of the groups that we have here at the coalition. That would be the Gender and Sexuality Working Group that does meet on the first Tuesday of the month. And is there anything that you can kind of share about what is going on there, or just we can let folks know just that those meetings are going on, and that's something that I believe folks are invited to as well?
So I do want to acknowledge that last year, me and two of the other folks, we were doing a lot, right? And we all have different, I'd like to say, wigs, that we wear, either to survive and or just because we believe in the fight and believe in the movement. And so like there's been a lot of labor giving into like this, and last year specifically was COVID happened, so Zoom happened. And so it just created this opportunity to talk to folks internationally, talk to folks of different, about different things that have been going on, to even bring in even thinking about bringing in somebody to talk about intersex and what does that look like, and how does that interact with, gender, so even thinking around those things, because those things are not usually brought up. So this year, we kind of took a step back and we were like, yo, this is just being real. It's a lot of labor, right? And we are not getting paid for this. So literally we took a step back and we're like, okay, what if we did 1 month, coming together and just talking about what do we want from the next meeting, and the next time having a wider audience. So that's what we've been doing. We've been doing 1 month on, 1 month off. This month, I think we did on, so next month is off. Next month is more of an internal dialogue where we talk about the things that we want to talk about next time. And we are talking about elevating. We do want to talk about more about, the intersection of like gender, race, and the medical industrial complex, gender and race and education, and especially thinking around what's been going on in Alabama and Arkansas with with the denial of trans, gender affirming care for trans youth, right? We also want to think about, our trans and queer undocumented folks that are still locked up, and think about like, how do we like elevate that and think about those things. And so that's what we've been doing. I'm hoping I'm being clear. I haven't eaten all day. So I'm going to mute myself and start eating. If you have any questions, let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelly. Yeah, we definitely we definitely want you to be taking care of yourself. And as you explained, you have a number of things going on there. So we just really appreciate you taking the time to join with us and meet with us, and not only be on the line, but to be also spending this time educating us as well, and sharing information about some of the things that you're doing and why that is so important and why it's meaningful. And if folks see there is Chella's Venmo right there, please do direct funds to Chella, just to be in support of the work that Chella is doing, and to be acknowledging that this is work, and especially to be giving that money, to be giving money to Black trans folks, to Black trans women, to Black trans artists, as much as possible. And that's Chella's band name, which is fucking awesome. It's an awesome band name. And and so, yeah, we definitely want to be supportive of Chella's band as well. And so again, I think I'll pause and see if we have any other questions. And I see there's a couple of chats here, but I'm not sure. Okay, that was Chella. I'm sorry. I'm just not, just catching on to the Zoom thing with the chat. All right. And so what we'll do now is we will kind of transition to 7:37. It's 7:37. We'll transition to, we did still have kind of another few things that we wanted to cover in terms of what we've been working on within this group. So the couple things that we still had were, and Hamid, if it's okay with you, I think it would be nice to do now would be to hear more about the SARS letter, and just to let folks know, like, that's when we're talking about data-informed community-focused policing and data-driven policing, and we're talking about, a core part of that is the architecture of surveillance, which is that scanning, that surveillance part that kind of is the start of that, and that is just ever present, that is ongoing, that collection of data. Part of that whole architecture and that whole system is suspicious activity reports, which of course will be a very familiar term for folks who have been familiar with the coalition's work for a while. It was one of the first fights, I believe, that folks really rallied around, and kind of it's never gone away, but we're kind of circling back to that fight right now. Hamid, are you good to talk a little bit more about what's going on with that fight right now?
Sure. So just to give a brief overview, so the Suspicious Activity Reporting Program, or SAR, was developed in the aftermath of the 9/11 Commission report and some of the policies and legislations that were passed, particularly in 2004, the Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, which created a whole bunch of structural changes. Created the Office of Director of National Intelligence, which brought all the major intelligence agencies like Defense Intelligence and Treasury Intelligence and everything else, about 17 plus main intelligence agency under one umbrella. It also created the broader information sharing environment. That was one of the mandates of the 2004 law, which mandated the executive branch to bring together all the information. And this was all built on the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission report, whose basic premise was that the events of 9/11 happened as a result of the failure to connect the dots and failure for information sharing between local to regional to federal to national to international agencies, both law enforcement, public sector, private sector agencies. So that was that's what set the tone. One of the things that emerged with that was, well, several things emerged. I mean, one of them, I guess earlier, Shakir was talking about fusion centers, which are these warehouses of data collection and information gathering and storing and sharing. And these are physical locations as well. I mean, they're basically mega spy advice centers where all our information goes. But programmatically, the Director of National Intelligence introduced a program called Suspicious Activity Reporting, which was based upon that how can we surveil people's behavior, and how can we then identify certain behaviors which can then lead us into further investigation and mine that data, which can then sort of tell us that what this person may be thinking of doing something. So which was absurd, both in practice and even like trying to understand what they're even trying to do. But the way the suspicious activity was defined was that it's observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning, which is just a bogus, speculative, hunch-based, and doesn't mean anything. Like, you're observing someone's behavior, which reasonably indicates that somebody's thinking of doing something wrong. And they came up with these standards of behaviors, which included taking photographs in public, using video cameras, walking into infrastructures, and asking about hours of operation. And they also included in the list a whole bunch of different things, which, somebody's stockpiling weapons and this, that, and the other. So that's what was then incorporated into everyday policing. It was originally just presented as a counterterrorism intelligence gathering, but then it became a part and parcel of everyday policing, and LAPD was the first local law enforcement agency to adopt this program. And the last national report we got was from the Government Accountability Office, GAO, which showed that close to over 14,000 local law enforcement agencies have this program. 300 Department of Defense agencies have this program. Every public sector agency have this program. And it's kind of set up as both that transit police, campus police, local law enforcement, that if you observe any of these behaviors, somebody taking photographs, you just make a notation and then inform the local law enforcement agency, which then works with the local fusion center where they're supposed to vet these things, and the local law enforcement is supposed to vet them too, whether it has any nexus to terrorism or criminal activity, and then it's uploaded into databases which can then be shared with all of these different agencies. So that's just a basic premise. After the LAPD rolled out this program under Special Order 11 by the chief at the point, Bill Bratton, the fight started, and that's what, as Tiff was saying, that was the first fight that the coalition basically was formed around, because it was very clear that how counterterrorism and counterinsurgency tactics were being incorporated into everyday policing. And we knew that, based on history and everything else, that who's going to be the target community of these things. But it is now beginning to provide that veneer of counterterrorism, veneer of national security. And also, as we have seen, it's been built up into this veneer of pseudoscience around predictive algorithms and machine learning and artificial intelligence. So this current sort of post 9/11 policing, I would say that the SAR program really became the foundation of this whole claim of behavioral surveillance and bringing the data together. And now we see social network analysis and various other things. And then we forced the Inspector General to do an audit, and of course, all our what we had claimed and talked about, it was very true, because one of the audits showed that over 31% of these secret files identified individuals as Black. I mean, the city of LA has 9.4% Black population, so that's clearly about a over 3-to-1 disparate impact. And in one of the reports where they had identified gender, they had listed 50% of that gender were identified as Black. Black women. So again, the same communities that have been historically targeted, that have been just on the receiving end of state violence and all, were now further being recycled into these secret lists and all of that. So the LAPD Inspector General is supposed to do an audit of these programs on an annual basis. And what Tiff was referring to is that the last audit they publicly released was from fiscal year 2016, 2017. But today, the Inspector General claimed that, which is also in their significant audit, database as well, that this was the last one was done in 2018. And it continues to show a whole lot of problems and a whole lot of racial profiling, because one of the main companion programs of the SAR program, which the law enforcement or police officers are involved in, the companion program is also built on community informants, and it's known as See Something, Say Something. So when we got these audits, we saw that majority of these reports were coming from predominantly white communities, from the West Bureau and the Valley Bureau. So it clearly became a license to racially profile. And this was something that, nothing, not surprising, but yet at the same time needed to be really just exposed and called upon. So we sent a letter to the Inspector General last night and talked about it at the Police Commission today on for them to release this information. And I'm going to post the link of that we posted this letter on on our website as well, and I'll just do that. So that's basically the gist of the program as well, and happy to answer any questions if folks have any.
Thanks so much for that update, Hamid, and that overview. And if folks have questions about that, please just chime right in or put something in the chat or raise your hand. But yeah, we very much invite folks to kind of join us in pushing back on, well, we don't know how much they respond to us on that, but I guess we're just used to them resisting whatever it is that we're asking for, demanding, whether it's very reasonable information, like, as Shakir updated us today, the Inspector General may come back with, well, it was last audited in 2018, actually. Like, but actually you're supposed to have been that they are supposed to do an audit every year, and they don't do it. And he kind of made it clear today at the meeting that one of the reasons they haven't been doing an audit is because he said, oh, well, last time we did it, we found that everything was 100% filled out in the correct way. And that kind of reminds us that, when we push for audits and when we demand audits, it's like we do that because this is a tool that gets us more information. It is something that can be used to push them to raise a conversation, to drive a conversation, and be releasing information about these programs that we want to know more about. But at the same time, an audit is like, it's their version of, like an audit is not what we would be looking for. It's going to be like, was everything filled out the correct way? But with that also comes some of the stuff that Hamid was describing in terms of who they are filed on, where they're coming from. So we do get information from that as well, as flawed as these audits are. So so that's a little bit about what's going on there. Thank you for that.
One quick thing, Tiff, if I could just add to that is that, so I posted these links in there too. So this is both to the letter that we sent last night and then also to a fact sheet that we created as well. But I think it's also interesting that what the IG claimed today was that by 2018, the number of SARs filed every year have gone down to 82 in 2018 or 88, some number like that, where it used to be, where over here, for example, from these years, 2008 to 12, almost 5,000 SARs were filed. That is about 3 a day. But I think it also speaks volumes to the organizing that has been going on. It also speaks volume to the power that we have built on the ground, and also speaks a lot to that, that we've kind of just exposed them and disrupted them and demanded an abolition of this program. And while this program has not been abolished, but almost from going to 3 a day, now it's down to 82 over the year. So, which is almost like now maybe one every whatever, 4 days or something. So our goal is really to eliminate this program, to abolish and dismantle this program. That's what we are building. But I think it's also speaks to community power, and it also speaks to that, what people can do when they come together and really knowing their fight and knowing what we are fighting against, and building that power together. So I just wanted to add a little bit of that to this too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hamid. Okay, and I think we just have a question in the chat, so I'm just gonna check on that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just reading this comment. I don't understand if they think you are suspicious, why not approach you, why intimidate and try to harm you? Yes, that's a really great question. And of course, we know that that this is all, I was gonna say it's all about white people. It's all about white people doing the reporting, which, it's not 100% white people, but it is that, that culture of, you're right, it's like, that culture of looking to police, looking to the city for answers, or just this whole concept of like feeling threatened by people in general, or this air that, yeah, just like the division in society. And I mean, a lot of that is to do with, yeah, the culture of deputization, as Hamid said. So, yeah, so. But yeah, that's definitely what we want to be talking more about and learning more about in terms of like why that happens. And then of course, sharing that information about like, this is why you don't want to be using those reporting systems. This is why you don't want to be calling the police. And I see we have a question here from Jamie as well. How else can we build power to dismantle it? It's the foundation of presumptive policing. It is all about data mining and behavioral surveillance. Maybe we need to do something besides demand and audit. Yeah, I mean, that is a great question. And Jamie, I don't know if you want to say any more about that, you're certainly welcome to.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about it today, just in listening in on the police commission. I didn't make a public comment because I wasn't able to, but it just had me thinking like, and I agree with Hamid that the attention that we brought to it, because it was up in the like hundreds of SARs they were collecting in a day, and so we brought it down to under 50. Still with the same disparities, basically that same thing, getting people out of the West Side or out of white communities that they didn't want there. But it had me kind of thinking like, what else are they using the suspicious activity for? Are they using it to track people, and I guess I don't even know if this is like legally right, but like unconstitutionally it gives them that edge to not have like reasonable suspicion, but they can monitor movement and then essentially set something up to like, capture somebody in a certain way. And I was thinking of, I don't know if parallel construction works that way, but I was curious is like, can we like, because I know they are, and then this is the whole problem that we had is that when we did the initial lawsuits, we couldn't get access to like active, I mean, obviously getting access to active like open cases, you can't, but like, how do we is there a way for us to find out how they're using them to somehow politicize that? Because like, are they being used in cases that are not counterterrorism cases, but then like they're using them to get people on drug charges? Or, I mean, I don't know. And so I was thinking about that. And then I was thinking about how essential it is, or yeah, to politicize SAR, because predictive policing and all other types of surveillance, the apparatus of setting up the architecture of surveillance, or, the information sharing environment or stalker state, like is dependent on what SAR instituted nationally and internationally. And the fact that it's about, trying to professionalize or limit what police can criminalize, right? And you see this, and I've been using this example, but like in Minneapolis, after the shooting of the young black man who had the something in his rear view mirror, and then they ended up shooting him when he was running away. And they're like, well, now we're going to limit it to what people can be pulled over for. These, and these. And everybody saw it as like this victory. And I was like, oh, that sounds like SAR. You know, they limit what they define this suspicious behavior. So now they have are not only articulated, but they have in like, what is the word I'm trying to use? Like, not legitimized, but they've created like these standards. Like, this is what, as long as you write the report in this way, that he had this, then whatever you did will be justified, right? And because that kind of comes under whatever, like if you think about SAR, there's like 16 behaviors that allow them to open it up. Well, then in you know, Minneapolis, there are 12 things that people can get pulled over for. And they all seem like liability, like confines, like if you can define it this way in your report, then the likelihood of this being, you know, kind of not challenged will be greater. Like, because I used to work in behavioral health centers, and anytime there was an incident where a person was restrained or a child was restrained, they taught you how to write your report to legitimize why your hands were placed on the person. So like, I'm like, oh, this is what it is. It's just, you know, and so anyways, there's something about that like that part of that behavioral surveillance that we like, I'm just like, how else can we like politicize that so that people see why it's more than just, we want a procedural audit, which isn't what we never wanted, right? And where we never like, but we were politicizing the procedural audit. And it's more than we just want one or two. It's the essence of what it's doing, and how else do we politicize that? You know, what else can we do? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Jamie, I'm glad you're thinking about it in that way. And that's because also just making me think about, like it gives police a kind of a script of these are the boxes you need to check to justify whatever escalation you're doing. But like, when I hear that, I mean, that's what the entire criminal code, the entire penal code is, you know, it's literally just like a vast menu of things that are very ambiguously worded, even like what assault is, or you know, petty assault, like the whole range menu of things that police can charge you with, even what, you know, resisting arrest is, and all of these things. So police and the whole menu of traffic stuff too. So police like have those scripts that they can kind of deploy all day, and sort of, you know, I guess unlike SAR, that's all they need is I mean, it's a higher standard because they need like probable cause, but they can easily just make that up and like just say, oh, I thought he was doing this, I thought I saw this, blah, blah. That's enough to put you in jail, to put a big bail on it, and just, you know, that's how the whole thing proceeds. And so, as I'm thinking about, and also the way you described it, is that SAR and the whole mode of like behavioral surveillance as like the approach to policing, and this just like, you know, even criminalizing, like you've been saying, and Ahmed was explaining in the intro, like basically just thoughts, like just criminalizing like pre-operational behaviors. That's a whole almost shift in what police are doing, and how they're just you know, have this new menu of going after not just like allegedly what you did, but like allegedly what you want to do. But I think there is, I want to just like, I feel like we have a task, because just with the reduction in the program, I if it used to be hundreds and now it's, and I noticed, this is maybe another aspect that is sort of, you know, we're thinking about as a community type victory or whatever, is I noticed, I was reading the recent audit, the one that covers 2018, and it says that any time one of the reports is unfounded, or LAPD deems it unfounded, which is like about maybe a third of them, or almost close to half for that year, they don't send it to the Fusion Center. They don't send it to JRIC, and they delete it from Palantir, and they just keep a physical hard copy that they destroy upon the audit happening. So they just wait until the OIG audit and destroy it. Of course, that's like what they're saying. That might all be totally bullshit. Like I'm sure that we have no idea if that's actually happening. But even that, I remember kind of hearing in the past about
the part of it was, yeah, this was just like a dragnet that was just generating all these reports on every single person, and they were just being stored forever. So yeah, I think I want to keep talking about how the thing has evolved, and like you said, how it was a foundation for all this stuff that's been built upon it. Which I know it's now 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm loving this conversation, and thank you so much, Jamie, and Shakir as well. Thank you, Jamie, for raising those questions, because yeah, I mean, I think now I'm also excited to keep talking about it as well, which we won't because it is 8 o'clock. But I guess we will continue that conversation. I don't know, I don't want to say our data informed community focused policing working group, because I think Jamie's not a part of that group, but I think that's where it fits. It's kind of that's where it fits right now. But we'll continue this conversation, and
we have a 5th Tuesday this month.
Sorry.
But yeah, definitely, yeah, super, have a lot of thoughts, and interested to keep carrying on the conversation about that. And yeah, I do want to acknowledge it's 8:01. We did have, we're not going to get to one thing, we're just not going to get to. Shakir, though, I didn't want to just completely jump over something that you've been working on, which was the academic complicity PRA. Did you want to say anything about that? Share that with the group, or are you good to just?
Yeah, I think that's. I think we could share it next time because we just got this stuff on Friday. If anyone is interested, I can share. It's a set of records. I was gonna kind of walk through them, but for now at least, I'll just say they're about communications between LAPD and particular academics, including this law professor who, just real quick, is like, Tiff, you were talking earlier about the rebranding of these programs and even the rebranding of specific terms. As like, it used to be called crime analysis details, now they're these ACCIC. So like it's a real window into how this rebranding happens, because it's like academics are like kind of sometimes showing up and pitching like, oh, you could call it this, we have thought about this, have you thought about pitching? So we've got our pause on some of those communications, and so if anyone wants to help look at those and analyze those, you should email either Stop FB Spying. I can share those and we can talk about them next time, and maybe, yeah, do more of a presentation on them next time.
Awesome. So yeah, that is something that we can look forward to as well. Thanks for sharing that email. But with that, yeah, that is everything that we wanted to cover today. If anyone has any announcements, now would be a time to chime in with anything that anybody wants to share. Otherwise, we will see you next time, we hope, at one of our many meetings or out in the community. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us and for being present and sharing your voices and sharing information, or just joining us and listening. So yeah, thanks so much, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
All right, good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.